County Chancery or Circuit Court. Your appeal must be filed within 60 days of the date of the entry of the Commission's decision. We advise that you seek your own independent legal counsel and advice to ensure that your appeal is filed in a timely manner and that all procedural requirements have been met. In front of us is the agenda. I move for an approval of the agenda.
So moved.
We have a first
Second.
and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Attached are the minutes of the meeting of October 10th and November 14th.
Move to approve.
Second.
We have a first and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. Please review the consent agenda. Are there any items that need to be removed from the consent agenda? If not, I'd like a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
We have a first and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. So please note that items on the consent agenda will be voted on at a single time. There'll be no individual public hearing.
October meeting minutes?
Yes,
Will we approve
we
those?
do approve
Oh, in
those.
November.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. So the consent agenda has been approved. All right. The consent agenda, item number 1. Well, let me first pause here. I think we have 2 members of the council here, Holly and Fabian. Is there anything you'd like to come forward and state concerning any of the items today?
No, yours is coming up. It's not on consent. You have one on consent and one not on consent. So this is, right now, we're just talking about pulling something from the consent agenda. Yours is actually going to be a case we talk about.
Okay. All right. Okay, thank you. All right. On the consent agenda, we have proposal number 2017M001AB001, a request to abandon a dead-end, unimproved portion of the overall street right-of-way and easement from Day Street northward to dead end, map 07007, parcels 061 and 062, map 07003, parcel 006, requested by the Trinity Lane Realty LLC applicant Terry Hakia and Trinity Lane Realty LLC owners. Resolution 12-16, authorize a stop on Regency Drive at Easterbrook Drive, authorize a stop on Arbor Drive at Easterbrook Drive, authorize a stop on Camelot Drive at Easterbrook Drive, authorize an all-way stop on Withrow Drive at Glen Park Drive, requested by Council Member Holly Huzo? Wazo. Okay. Thank you. District 13. Okay, that's the consent agenda, those items. Any discussion?
I just want to clarify that's Winthorne, not, I think there's a typo in there. Winthorne Drive, correct? Yeah, see the typo in the agenda.
Okay. Winthorne? Okay. Yeah, I got Winthrone. So, Winthorne. Okay. All right. Any comments or discussion? Motion to approve?
So moved. So moved.
Second.
All in favor? We need a hand vote, is that correct? Okay, please raise your hand. Any opposed? Passed unanimously. Okay. Did you say Mr. Bedney had an item under old business?
Well, we've got each council person has something under old business.
Okay.
So your choice on which one.
We'll let them go first. Is Mr. Turner here? Yes. Okay. We'll go to old business first. Request to appeal, old business item A, request to appeal the installation of an all-way stop on Blackwood Drive at Norwalk Court, requested by Councilmember Holly Wesno, District 13. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon. The reason that we're requesting the four-way stop at Blackwood and Norwalk is because people are using Blackwood Drive and Norwalk Drive as a cut-through from Bell Road to avoid the traffic. So there's a major speeding issue right there. And the increase in pedestrian traffic that we've had with children, handicap, it's a safety issue more than anything with the speeding and all. And by putting a four-way stop right there would significantly slow down the traffic from the people just speeding through to get from one area to another. And so on behalf of the residents, I would just ask that you please approve it
You're asking for the stop sign? right?
for the stop sign.
Okay.
There's one currently at Norwalk Court and at Norwalk Drive, which intersects Blackwood. So we're asking really for one on Blackwood Drive to make it an always stop.
Because it just says repeal. Are we repealing or approving?
Yeah, it's an appeal. We are not recommending a stop, and I'll tell you why, and it's not end of the world or anything. We try to go by these guidelines, and actually we're going to do a presentation later on always stops and how we decide when to put them in. But we did data collection out there, and we look at accidents, we look at sight distance, and here's the numbers. So whenever we do an always stop analysis, you're never going to get your volumes that really get over that threshold in pure numbers. But what we do look for is a 50-50-ish split, or where you start having queues back up. Now, these volumes, you're not going to have any delay back. You're not going to have a quarter mile backup at an always stop. So, but I did want to present that this is a 74-26 split. It looked like Corby, and the volumes are low. So we're not recommending an always split per the book. There's no crashes. There's no sight distance issues. It doesn't meet that 50-50-ish split, and we did the speed data. Go back to the speed. Was it on there, Corby? Oh, there it is. At 85th percentile, lower left. That's the number that we engineers look for. That's 85% of your traffic's going this speed or less. That's what the feds say to look for when you decide if you have a speeding issue. And it's right at 29, which is the posted speed. With that said, I always go back with I don't live there. I have visited there and looked at these stop signs, but I always lean on the council person to make a recommendation if it's not going to be traumatic for traffic. And so in this case, it's not traumatic. I did want her to come in and present a case on why the neighborhood would want this versus just an engineer saying, there's no numbers here, let's give it to them anyway. So it's always a good exercise to hear your case. I don't have a big opposition to it, but I did want you to see the numbers. And then when Amy does her presentation, think about this when you were thinking about always stops, when Amy brings forward some things to look for when you do an always stop analysis. With that said, I don't have a problem putting in this always stop. I did want you to go through the exercise of seeing these numbers, though.
Yes, Councilman.
Well, I think we're running into this a lot of times because a lot of these traffic problems that she's talking about, that's what they're starting to do. They're doing the same thing in my area. They'll cut through a subdivision to avoid like Chutes Lane and Oakley Boulevard, especially when school's getting out over there. And I have a lot of people that request that as well, and we just keep an eye on it to see if we can help anyway. And of course, most of the time we always hear people want speed bumps, and we don't like speed bumps because they're for emergency equipment and things of that nature. So I understand where she's coming from, and if she knows better and she's talked to the community, I know from an engineering standpoint, I can understand those figures and reasoning not to do it. But at the same time, we have to look at the practical of situation, what's going on out there. So I would vote in favor of it.
Any further discussion?
Well, I was just curious from staff if they've looked at other options. Was there, consideration for maybe putting bike lanes, some way to narrow, some strategic ways to show traffic calming in the area?
We have not at this point. Now, we can continue to kind of look at the less evasive traffic calming tools we have, like narrowing the road or painting 30 miles per hour on the pavement, that sort of thing. We can look at that. We can look at that post putting in these signs if you'd like, but we have not done that at this point.
Yes.
There are currently sidewalks on Blackwood Drive. I don't know how much more you could narrow the street. but we do have sidewalks. There is a shopping center right up the street close to Bell Road on Blackwood, and there's a new Dollar General. So that's increased the foot traffic from people in the neighborhood just walking back and forth. And with the speed issue that we have going on, people have actually ran up on the sidewalks because they're going so fast. And I've had several people in their neighborhood call me telling me they've almost been hit. So that's one of the reasons we are requesting this, is just to really slow down that traffic right there. By putting this stop sign, we feel like, by them having to stop, then they're not going to be able to go the 50 miles or so that they're going currently all the way down.
Chip, question, do you a lot of times look at installing crosswalks when you get to four-way stops?
Yeah, well, per Metro Code, every intersection has a crosswalk. It gets into the marked versus the unmarked, and then, well, boy, it blows my mind. But that's where there are compliant crossings, ADA compliant crossings available, and we have a need, if there's a pedestrian need for marked crosswalks, we will go back and put them in, yeah.
Is there any further discussion?
And have you've talked to the neighbors that live right around there, or?
Yes, ma'am. They're
Okay.
actually the ones that called me and requested it.
Okay.
Several that reside right there on Blackwood and Norwalk. And if I'm not mistaken, I think that Public Works just put in, I know they redid the sidewalks on Blackwood, and I think they just put in a crosswalk for ADA purposes.
Could be, I believe you.
Okay.
So much going on. Could be.
Well, I'd like to make a motion to. Thank you. I'd like to make a motion to approve the, appeal of denial for the installation of an all-way stop at Blackwood Drive and Norwalk Court.
All right, we have a first. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes.
Thank
Congratulations.
you so much. I appreciate
Thank
it. Thank you.
Okay. Old business item B, request to appeal the denial of speed limit reduction on Oakfield Grove Drive from 30 miles per hour to 25 miles per hour. This is requested by Council Member Fabian Bedney, District 31. Councilman, would you like to come forward, make comments, please?
Thank you, Chair. Can I invite Mr. Stewart to come with me?
Yes, that'd be fine.
Okay. He's my bodyguard. The reason we need to lower the speed on that road is because of changes that happen between planning a development and actually using a development. In this case, the planning department believes in connectivity, and subdivisions, when they get connected, sometimes in a straight lane for a long time, it creates a problem for the neighbors that live along those roads, and it creates a sense that the place is not as safe as what they thought they were buying into. So what we're trying is to restore somehow a sense of safety, suburban living in that community where people feel more encouraged to walk, to use the sidewalks, to let their kids play on the yard, obviously not on the street. And so to lower the speed from 30 to 25, the hope is that we'll be able to restore some of what it was there before the subdivisions were connected. I wish I could take credit for this. I'm wholeheartedly in support, but this was something that came out of a community meeting where many of the residents on both subdivisions came and requested that we take a series of measures to try to deal with that. Mr. Stewart is one of the people that were holding a knife to my neck, so if you want to.
Thanks. My name is Bill Stewart. I live at 7840 Oakfield Grove,
Okay.
Which is very close to where your little hand icon is there. One of the newer residents in this area has been completed and built out within the last 2 years. The area that's at the top of your picture there where the dirt is, that is now completed and cuts through to the Indian Creek subdivision that's at the north right there. So what's resulted is we now have a cut through on Oakfield Grove where traffic from that subdivision as well as others that are not on your picture up there, but I guess that's Old Hickory back there and the Barnes Road area, all that. So now that has become a cut-through to get to the commercial area here at the south, where the Kroger, Publix, Concord Road, Nolensville Road intersection, all that is. That's one problem. The second problem is that with the development of that area, and I'm sure Chip and the Public Works guys can attest to this, of the traffic that builds up north, backing up north on Nolensville Road from that Concord intersection. So people now cut through the Autumn Oaks subdivision to go around that loop that you'll see if you raise that up a little bit, the other way. Coming up Autumn Oaks Drive, and it cuts through, people go all the way around this to get down to the traffic light that's down there by the Kroger. So we have two instances now where we've created a thoroughfare on Autumn Crossing Way. And the speeds in there get flat out scary sometimes. Fabian helped us with contacting Chip's group and Ali Afis, and these guys have been unbelievably responsive. I mean, I can't thank them enough for some of the things that they've done. They did 2 speed studies in the last 18 to 24 months. I don't know what the technical name of it is, but the rubber hose things that you put down. The data from those, I don't think were very supportive of a speeding problem, and I'm not being critical, but as a resident there, I would make 2 observations about that. Those 2 sets of rubber hoses were put in places that were very close to current intersections, so I don't think that you had a good study of cars at speed. They were either speeding up through the chicane at the south side of that or slowing down to get to the stop sign that's at Oakfield Grove and Autumn Crossing Way. So I don't think that that was completely representative. The second thing is that everybody slows down when they see those anyway. They know what they are. So I don't know how, I've got other neighbors here who can certainly testify. We all stand out and watch. I even have a radar gun myself, and I've gotten cars going 50 plus miles an hour right in front of my house, headed toward that speed or toward the stop sign. So they've done some other things. They put some high reflective stop signs up and put some of the painted stop bars. Those have been unbelievably effective in getting people to quit running that stop sign at that intersection. But we as a community think that lowering the speed limit to 25 miles an hour would be a big step in the right direction, just to signal to the traffic coming through that, this is a high density neighborhood. You can get a feel for it on that map. This is not, 2-acre lots. This is houses that are 20 feet apart. We've got a bunch of young families in the neighborhood, kids that play on sidewalks that are that far from the street. And, the danger just scares those of us who are adults and watch this and don't play in the street ourselves. We did a survey in the neighborhood back in September, just to give you some of the statistics. I could bore you with them a lot if you want, but the major ones were, we had right at 50% of the neighborhood responding to this, which everybody tells me is really good. 78% favored dropping the speed limit to 25 miles an hour max. We also had a couple other questions there. 75% favored putting a 4-way stop, which we'll bring up at a later date at the Autumn Crossing Oakfield Grove intersection, and a 4-way stop at the Autumn Crossing Way and Scarlet Ridge intersection, which is the feeder off Nolensville Road. So happy to entertain any questions if anybody's got anything. Obviously, I have a lot of passion about this, and I'll stand up here all night and talk to you about it if you want.
Thank you, Mr. Stewart. Commissioners?
So I forgot to say, I apologize, that I support the request to lower the speed. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioners, any comments, discussions, please? Chip, do you have anything you can add or
Well, first, I'd like to
background,
say
please?
thank you to Mr. Stewart for blowing our cover. We don't even hook the tubes up. We just kind of put them out there. I'm kidding. He makes very good points. What's happening here is Metro Code states that residential roadways are 30 miles an hour. And we study it, and unless something really jumps out at us to vary from Metro Code, we bring to the commission. So we call it an appeal, but that's a loose term of, do you guys mind if we vary against the Metro Code that says 30 and put up some 25-mile-per-hour signs? The negatives to that are violations sometimes. It involves a little more enforcement. But if they're speeding, because if they're speeding at 30, they're going to speed at 25. But, so you almost kind of punish the innocent by putting in speeds that lower it just because of speeding. can understand that. So in this case, we had an 85th percentile of 34. You make good points. It depends where you put those tubes sometime. If you put them in the wrong place, your data is no good. Again, I kind of like the stop sign with the previous council member. The council member knows this area so well. The neighbors know it better than anyone in this room. I do have to do my engineering duty and put on the blinders and say X, Y, and Z in enforcement, but this isolated stretch in that area, if that's what the neighbors want, it's not the end of the world. So I half support it, but I have to be an engineer sometimes too.
Any comments, questions?
Well, I'll just say, I mean, it sounds kind of similar to some other neighborhoods we've heard about where 30 might just be too high for kind of a residential area.
And I didn't
so-
mean to interrupt, but we're leaning towards some walkable neighborhoods. You've been part of that. There are going to be neighborhoods that we'll be bringing before you that go to 20 and 25 miles per hour as an entire neighborhood, with the exception of the collectors and arterials that may be within them. So this is kind of the tip of the iceberg of where we're going as a community, as a more walkable area where we can afford to do so. So thank you for bringing this to us. You might be the first of a big trend, but 25 miles per hour based on the nature of the area for walking, I understand that.
Yes, Ms.
Well,
Pat.
yeah, and I just wanted to add, I think Nori may be thinking the same thing. It's just that we know the injuries are so much greater even at 5 miles more per hour. So certainly understand the request. Thank you. And with that, I'd like to,
Oh, we've got some areas in Old Hickory that are 25 miles in the area, which are walkable areas. And of course, like you said, they're going to do a little bit more than 25, but at least they're 30 and below. So I'm good with that.
I'd like to make a motion
Yeah, second?
to approve.
All right, there's a first and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Congratulations, Councilman, you're passed. Thank you, Mr. Stewart, for your citizen work. Maybe the Sergeant Denton will deputize you with your radar.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Okay. New business. Item A is 35 spaces at the library garage at regular monthly rate for the term requested by Tom Turner, the Nashville Downtown Partnership. And then I understand that it's 70 spaces instead of 40 at the Public Square Garage at the regular monthly rate for the term requested by Tom Turner, Nashville Downtown Partnership. Mr. Turner, would you like to come forward and make a short presentation, please?
Thank you and good afternoon. I have Matt Wilshire here also with the Mayor's Office of Economic and Community Development. On the library garage, we have a tenant who is looking to move in to an office building close by, and they're trying to wrap up the certainty of parking spaces. We do have some under construction close by, and they're looking to wrap up 35 at the regular monthly rate during the term, and it is July 1 of 17 to June 30 of 24. That's the term of the lease that they would be signing. And I'll go to the courthouse garage if you'd like, very similar. This is 70 spaces, again, at the regular monthly rate of $135. Theirs would begin on September 1st of 2018. There are some space contracts there that go until then. And it would be just roughly a 9-year term through 9/30 of 27. And we expect to have space available for both of those tenants at that time.
Okay, thank you. Staff, is there any background to this prior to comments?
Not at this time.
So you want to clarify that this is for proposed development? You sometimes have to do these arrangements as an agreement with the proposed development, right?
That's right, with new tenants coming into town and new jobs.
I was curious, how much of those 2 parking garages will then be tied up in, or do you know, in the different contracts? You know, how much of it would still be free and open to the public?
None of it's free.
Well, okay, sorry, free, I mean
kidding.
available, not
Sorry.
free with the charge.
Right now in the library garage, there are about 350 monthly spaces. We expect that to go up when the construction finishes, because when the construction came on, it introduced some variables there based on what floors would be occupied by the construction crew at certain times, so the number of monthlies dropped a little bit there. But it's 350 there out of 1,033, and it's going up to roughly about 1,383. We think we'll get about 350 spaces, depending on how it's actually striped. So you're adding, you're adding 35 spaces out of what would be 1,383, so that's going to be tough for me to do in my head, but I think it's about 3%. And then on the courthouse, it's certainly a different operation, different type of facility, and about 850 are monthlies there right now out of the 1,050 that are public. There's another 150 spaces that, actually that's out of the 1,200, but only 1,050 are public there. So that would add 70 spaces there, but there are about 400 under contract now that term at the end of August of 2018.
400 of those 850.
Mm-hmm. That's correct.
And Tom, for this request, both of these are 9-year terms, I guess?
I think one's a 7.
Do they fluctuate over the term, or
It would be at the going rate.
the going rate?
So if it's
Okay.
135 today and the commission decides in the future that it's 140, then it goes to 140.
Okay, and I've got to ask, so in part of these negotiations, do you work with MTA at all and, try to encourage the employers to look at opportunities to take transit and?
We
and-
do, and to take everything else available to them and talk about the percentages of people that will take transit, the ones that will walk, and go through it, and also try to help them determine a maximum Parker demand too, and make suggestions on what we think's maybe a reasonable approach. A lot of companies are asking for information about whether they should, and what other companies do about funding the entire monthly parking fee, and we make suggestions about covering the amount up to the MTA monthly pass, and then let employees make an economic decision for themselves as to what they would like to do for their own economic purposes.
Great, thank you.
Any other comments or questions from Commissioners? Does Mr. Wiltshire, you have anything to add to this?
I won't take up your time. I appreciate the commission considering these requests. These are two exciting economic developments coming downtown. We're excited about both of them. No cost to the city, right? They're paying. And in some ways, we view this as an ability to guarantee revenue for the city for the future. So it's even a hedge against, I don't expect it to happen anytime soon, but if there were a downtick in demand for parking, we would at least have guaranteed revenue from these two tenants. But overall, we view this as a positive development and appreciate your considerations.
All right. Any other comments or questions from Commissioner? Do we have a motion?
So moved.
First?
Second?
We have a first and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
It was approved. Thank you, Mr. Turner.
Thank you, sir. Thank you all.
Okay, Chip. I think we're going to try to do a little education of the commissioners for a few minutes.
Well, we have Amy Birch from RPM Transportation Consultants. She's going to refresh my memory on how to do an always stop, and if you guys want to listen, that's cool.
All right.
It won't take very much of your time, but we're going to try to do these every couple of meetings or so, kind of refresh on how this works.
Yeah, and so commissioners, if you all have suggestions, ideas about some items that discuss, we're trying to do items that are under
we're
the
gonna do
purview of
signal-
the commission that help us make better decisions.
We're going to do signal warrants, we're going to do traffic calming, we're going to do speed limits, just the basic stuff that we hear every month, maybe just a kind of refresher to see how it works.
Great. Thank you. Again, my name is Amy Birch. I'm with RPM Transportation Consultants. Thanks. So First, this picture here is of the cover of the manual and uniform traffic control devices. You've probably heard this term many times in this room, but I just want to give a refresher on what that is. We often just call it by the acronym, the MUTCD, and it is a document that is put out by the Federal Highway Administration, and it contains all national design, application, placement standards, guidance, option, and support provisions for traffic control devices. And the purpose of the MUTCD is to provide uniformity of these devices, which include signs, signals, pavement markings, and that's to promote highway safety and efficiency on the nation's streets and highways.
And that it's informal. We're just going to talk.
Sure.
By charter, we follow the MUTCD. That's in our Metro Charter.
Mm-hmm. So if you can go back to that one slide. Thank you, Corby. So stop signs are called regulatory signs. We have regulatory signs, warning signs, and the warning signs are typically the yellow signs that you see. But regulatory signs are, one is stop signs, and they establish the right-of-way at intersections. And this is described specifically in the MUTCD in this section 2B. Stop signs are a form of intersection control, so the national standards and engineering judgment is supposed to be used to establish what the intersection control is. And there's a number of factors that go into a traffic study that would determine what the traffic control at an intersection would be. And those are things like vehicular volume, bicycle volume, pedestrian volume, number of approaches. Is it a T intersection or is it a four approach intersection? Does it have a skew? And as well as approach speed. So that's what's the speed limit, but what's also the prevailing speed, not necessarily what is the speed that we want. And sight distance, so if a driver is approaching a stop sign or an intersection, can they see oncoming traffic? And also crashes. So next slide. So typically, we have really two different types of stop sign applications. So we have a two-way stop control. So the main street is free-flowing, and then the minor street typically is controlled by a stop sign. So a stop sign on the minor street, we consider those when these criteria are met, and that's over 6,000 vehicles per day. If the sight distance requires a motorist to stop, again, if you're approaching the intersection, you can't see oncoming traffic, you need to be able to stop and then look. And then also crashes. There's crash criteria. And the MUTCD says a full stop is not always necessary. It could occur with a yield sign. That's not typically something that we look at. Some older neighborhoods in Nashville have yield signs instead of stop signs, and some of those are changed here in this commission I've seen. So on the next slide, this is a table that addresses multi-way stops. So that's what's often called all-way stops or four-way stops. And we have criteria about what is the speed of the major street. We also have the volume criteria in these columns of the major street and of the minor street, and then a delay criteria and a crash criteria. So this is like a kind of a warrant table that shows, as we look through each of these different criteria, what's required. So the A, it says that we can put in a always stop when we're waiting on maybe the design and construction of a traffic signal. So that happens fairly often. And then also there's a crash warrant when we have more than an intersection experiences more than 5 crashes in a 12-month period. And those are crashes that are susceptible to an always correction by an always stop. That's like an angle crash or a left turn, right turn crash where those occur, not necessarily a rear end crash. Then the ones listed as C, 1 and 2 and 3, those are primarily based on volume criteria. And it's an 8-hour volume, and these volumes you'll see, so on a major street, we're talking about 300 vehicles per hour on the total of both the major street approaches, and then also at the same time, 200 vehicles per hour on the minor street. And sounds pretty high, right? And it's supposed to occur for 8 hours, or the warrant says you need to meet it for 8 hours a day. It doesn't have to be 8 consecutive hours, but when we're looking at maybe neighborhood streets where traffic is only busy in the morning and the afternoon, that's when it's really hard to meet that volume criteria. And then, let's see, when the speed is above 40 miles per hour, the volume criteria is lowered a little bit. So it's, instead of 300, it's 210 vehicles per hour, and instead of 200 vehicles per hour on the minor street, it's 140. And I am saying vehicles, but in this case, we also factor in and look at pedestrian volume and bicycle volume. Those can go into that number criteria. And then the last warrant is what we call the 80% warrant. So if you've kind of got vehicular volume that doesn't quite meet the criteria for the major and minor street, and it also doesn't quite meet the delay at the intersection or the number of crashes, then based on those numbers, it could be met at the 80%. So, next slide, please. That's right. So, we also look at several things, and I already mentioned those, but some of these, like sight distance restrictions. So if you really can't see, then we might need to look at stopping all approaches to make the intersection safe. There's also, we need to look at left turn conflicts, and as well as vehicle and pedestrian conflicts when considering the application of always stops. Sometimes, it's necessary to install an always stop when you have residential collectors that intersect. So this is the most common issue that we deal with, but stop signs are not considered traffic calming devices. They are, like I said, regulatory devices, so they're not supposed to be used to control speed. And actually, several studies have shown that installing unwarranted always stops can actually increase speed because drivers may want to make up the time in between when they have to stop. So some of the effects of unwarranted always stop signs are safety, because compliance can be poor when you have stop signs that a driver thinks are not necessary. They may choose to ignore them, roll through them, and that can be unsafe for other drivers that are entering the intersection at that time. Also, on safety, the safety of pedestrians may be decreased because neighbors may get a false sense of safety, and then you may have that condition where someone does not comply with the stop sign. It's also possible to have a frequency or increase in rear-end crashes. Then, in terms of the environment, it adds a little additional air pollution that's been noted in studies, increase in fuel consumption, and noise from stopping and starting. So this is an example of just a volume warrant just kind of made up numbers, but looking at the hourly volume on the Main Street and the Minor Street and showing how we apply these warrants. So in this case, we're saying the 85th percentile speed is 30 miles per hour. So that means that the higher volume is the criteria to look at. So we're looking at a criteria of needing 300 vehicles per hour on the major street and then 200 vehicles per hour on the minor street. So we collect data using the tubes that's been mentioned today for all the approaches to the intersection and see what those volumes are and then just compare it in a table similar to this. We also will pull the crashes to see how many crashes have occurred at the intersection within a 12-month period. So in this case, for this example, we're showing 3 crashes, which does not meet the crash warrant of 5 crashes in a 12-month period, so it would not meet, I think it's warrant B. And then warrant D is the 80% volume in that far right corner column, and it does say that it's warranted. So this table, you would need 8 hours to meet the warrant for an all-way stop, and it shows that this intersection, this example does. On the last slide, this is an example of an intersection I think I just chose because we had some data on it, and it's probably something, a location where many of you are probably familiar with. So it's 18th Avenue South and Portland Avenue, which Portland becomes Belmont Boulevard. So it's just south of Magnolia Boulevard and east of 21st Avenue South. So these volumes show that on Portland Avenue, the east-west intersection, the volumes are in the 400 to 500 range during the AM and PM peak hours, and then the volume on 18th Avenue South going north and southbound, it's lower in the morning in the 100, 200 vehicles per hour range, and then higher in the afternoons between 400, 500, 600 vehicles per hour. So this is just showing 4 hours. We would typically look at 8 hours, but this is just an example to show you that it does warrant, and it is an always stop. And those volumes are pretty high. One thing that I think Chip says often, and we talk about is, because the criteria is so high, sometimes if you warrant an always stop, it gets really close to warranting a traffic signal. So we can talk about those at a future meeting, but I think that's about all we had. If there are any questions.
Well, thank you.
So
Ms.
stop
Burris,
signs are
appreciate it.
economically affordable. They're cheaper than traffic signals, and we just got to put them in the right place at the right time. Now, she just hit on it. You're very rarely going to meet these thresholds for volume because neighborhoods just don't have that kind of traffic. So then we start backing off into, is it at least balanced? Is there other needs? Is the council person supportive? And then you guys vote on it. But I just want you to know that behind the scenes, we do crunch a few numbers along the way before we just come in here and wing it. We do that too. But so we'll be doing these about every month or so.
Okay. Well, thank you all.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Chip and Diane and Mark, thank you for your help today. Well, wait just 1 second. I'm going to thank, I hope everyone has a great holiday. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and it's hard to believe we'll see everybody in 2017. And Sergeant?
Make a motion to adjourn.
It's second and it's been approved. Thank you all. Happy New Year.